Welcome to Music Matters Podcast with Daryl Craig Harris, talking about all things music with celebrities, artists, music business insiders, and more. Mr. Ralphi Rosario, how you doing?
Good, Daryl. How's it going?
I am good. Like we spoke, we were just talking about, we spoke a long time ago.
Yes. And then we connected when we did a little session. You did some bass line licks for me on a project that I was actually working on. So that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, we've had a couple of interactions. I think we're going to do more in the future because we have a lot of stuff happening together, possibly down the road. So you have a very interesting history. You have several number one hits, Grammy nominated. You're part of the Hot Mix 5 crew back in the early 80s who really founded house music. You're kind of credited for that.
Yes.
Since then, you've worked with just a long list of folks. And I'm going to actually look at it because it's so long. It's NXS, Culture Beat, Gloria Estefan, Beyonce, Pet Shop Boys, Madonna, Kylie Minogue, Giorgio Moroder, Michael Bublé. I mean, it's Mariah Carey. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, it was this extensive list of pop artists at the time, probably in the late 90s into the 2000s, where the remixing game was a really big thing.
Right.
And I was actually lucky to fall into that work area where they actually relied on me to reinterpret some of their work for the dance floor. And I was honored, and I'm glad I have those feathers in my cap about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have the names, but you've worked hard and you've had a long career. Tell me about going back to Chicago in the early 80s. You guys founded the Hot Mix 5 crew. Tell me how that kind of came about.
The Hot Mix 5 crew basically was before they were actually named Hot Mix 5, it was just like maybe 5 to 7 guys that were turning in mixtapes on the radio station for this radio station called WBMX because they wanted to do, DJ mixes on the weekends. So they thought that would be a cool thing to add to their lineup and their programming. So I had gotten a link to the radio station to hook up with them through a record pool that I belong to called Naja Record Pool, NDJA. And Don St. James was the director of the pool, and he says, hey, the radio station is looking for DJs. If you want to submit some tapes, maybe it'll be aired, maybe it won't be aired. So I just kept sending tapes every week, and I got nothing, right? And then one night I just, I was 14 years old, dude.
Wow.
14.
You're a baby.
I was, but the thing is, I was so into what was going on with the music in the 80s the early 80s that I fell from disco because I was a big disco fan. And then all of a sudden it became dance music. It was no longer disco, right? So then one night in particular, I turned on the radio, 10 o'clock mix came on, the first song on the mix. I'm like, that really does sound like mine, but I'm not sure about that. 3 records in, I'm like, this is definitely my mix. They're playing it. And this was something, the mix was done like 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I guess that somebody didn't show up, if somebody didn't do anything, and they kept them, and I kept consistently turning them in, and they play them all the time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Chicago, of course, that having a hit in Chicago, LA, New York, that's a major deal, especially going back then. Now the market's a little bit diluted because we have so much online. But back then, if you're hitting in Chicago, New York, LA, Miami, like those are major radio markets. So how exciting is that? You're 14 years old. And
it was very exciting. I couldn't believe it. I ran to my mom and I told my sister. We were all living together at the time, and they didn't believe it for a minute there. And then I just kept consistently, again, it's the consistency paid off.
Right.
The turning in the tapes every week, they saw my name. They knew I was consistent. They knew that I was giving them a good show for the hour, and it just took off. And then go ahead. I'm sorry. No,
I was just gonna say, so you're known for a certain style of mixing and that kind of thing, but who were some of your influences? Like, who were some of the early people that really turned you on to music?
In terms of the DJ sensibility?
DJ and artists as well.
DJ sensibility, of course, a lot of the disco DJs, because there was a radio station prior to BMX called WDAI, and they called it Disco DAI, right?
Oh, okay.
And one guy in particular, his name was Kenny Jason, was the one that I always gravitated towards. And I loved how he played, because he played everything. He played a little bit of disco. He played soul disco. He played commercial stuff. He was great at that endless web of sound that we love called, the mixes back in the
Right,
day.
just keeping people moving and
Yeah, yeah. So he was one of them. And then there were a bunch of other guys on the radio on Disco DAI that I really love. Peter Lewicki was another guy, Lou DeVito. They were all disco DJs in their own right in Chicago, and they were on it.
yeah, and that's coming. I mean, people forget too. Like, I mean, we're a little older, but people forget
And yeah,
how
just a wee
yeah, a
bit
little bit.
older, just a
Yeah, yeah.
wee bit.
Hey, but well, at least we made it, right?
Yeah.
But people forget like how big disco was. Like I was in, I guess, junior high, maybe in 77, 78 when
Right.
Saturday Night Fever's hitting and it was a big freaking deal. I
Now
probably
remember, that was all the commercializing of disco, but there was a
right.
whole nother side of it that was hidden away and was very underground. And a lot of that was a lot of soul disco.
Ah,
So
okay.
we think about groups called like the Tramps who did Disco Inferno.
Right.
We're talking about another group called Double Exposure. We're talking about a lot of underground soul artists that were doing disco, and it was different. And that's how house was connected back in the day, because
Ah,
there
okay.
was Frankie Knuckles was playing all that stuff that was not commercialized, and that became an essential thing to be popular.
Right. I mean, and a lot of other artists came out of there, like Rick James, all these guys that we know and
Yep.
love. They all came
Yep.
from that same sort
Yes,
of
they
root,
did.
family
Very
root, right?
underground, and next thing you know, commercial success.
Yeah, Georgia Moroder, all those guys. It's interesting. Like the history is amazing. Who was originally in Hot Mix Five? Who were the guys?
So Hot Mix 5 turned out to be myself, Ralphie Rosario. Then there was Kenny Jason, who actually moved from Disco DAI and then years later got on the Mix Show. Mickey Oliver, Scott Sills, and then there was Farley Williams, and he called himself Farley Jackmaster Funk. So the us five, and me being the youngest member of the group, we were consistently turning in mixtapes every week. And these guys worked in clubs. I was still in high school. I wasn't working in clubs.
Yeah, you were barely in high school.
I was very, yeah, exactly. I didn't start moving around and doing like cool teen parties and stuff until like my junior year in high school, when the whole thing with Hot Mix 5 blew up.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's amazing story. And like, so how big is? I mean, it seems like collaboration is a big thing, and I know that we have our friends too that we both work with Dean Bouchal, who's a producer,
Yes.
director, and then Craig Snyder, who's also a producer. How big has collaboration played a part in your success and your background?
As far as production in the studio, after playing records for so many years, I wanted to make records like a lot of guys in Chicago back in the day. So I started exploring and seeing, how was it to be put together? How does it work? How do you do it? I see that Atari tape machine back there in your studio. And it's funny because I remember cutting tape on those machines when some of it would go wrong, or quarter-inch tape. So it was a
Yeah,
hard lesson to learn.
like literally cutting tape with a razor
Exactly.
blade.
A crash course with, yeah, a splicing block, a grease pencil. Wait, I
Right.
think I still have a grease pencil in here somewhere.
Yeah.
No,
Funny.
anyway, yeah, look, a grease pencil,
Funny.
just to
You should.
remind me to never forget where I came from.
Yeah. Right. You should put that thing up on eBay.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
but then I ran across a few people. My favorite people were the recording engineers,
Hmm.
because they were the tech heads behind everything. I learned a lot from them, and then I started doing things on my own. And then once that happened, I realized that it could be done. I can do it. And then later on, I started working with other people. Craig Snyder was the first person that came to my studio in Buena Park when I had my own setup years later. And he was one of the first programmers that I used to help out with keys and getting the pitch correct. And because of him, I can't watch American Idol.
Yeah, I know.
That
And the
those
voice,
notes
and
that
the voice.
screech at you, it's like
Yeah.
I blame him.
Yeah, yeah. I don't say I have perfect pitch, but I have pretty good pitch, and I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, and even still, I hear stuff on the radio, especially some of the stuff that came out of the '70s and the '60s, and it's not, there's some stuff in there that's like, but it's
Yeah,
still,
exactly. It's just kind of like what Craig calls it, the rub. I'm just like, ugh. I'm just like this every time I might hear a bad note.
yeah, it's the dissonance. So tell me, like, so you've worked with a long, long list of stars. I mentioned only a few because it's a very long list. So tell me how that started, like getting the celebrity remixes and like what happens when Madonna or her reps call you or Cher's reps.
Well,
What's
here's
that like?
one of the coolest things that happened was when I went to visit New York a few times. I went basically clubbing, and I met a lot of record people in New York, and they took me everywhere. One of my good friends, still a good friend, Leslie Doyle, was one of those people that was instrumental in introducing me to so many people that were working promotion of these record companies. I just became friends with them. I wasn't wanting anything. I didn't need anything. Yeah, sure. I wanted to go in the remix game, but there were so many great players already.
Yeah,
I
it's like
wasn't ready for that.
where do you even start with that, right?
Right. I wasn't ready for that. But what I did do was consistently put out my own music.
Mm.
That was the key to actually getting hired to do remixes. Once all my stuff started popping and it did a lot of cool what I say, it did a lot of cool popularity, especially overseas. Like I had a number one record in Italy for 2 weeks, Take Me Up, with my friend Donna Blakely. She was a background singer, and I wrote something for her.
Right.
And so I did it on my own. And then a friend of mine in Chicago who had a record company says, "Hey, let's put this out." He didn't care. I was like, just go ahead, put it out. You never know what's going to happen with things.
Yeah, you just kind of keep hitting it until something pops off.
And,
Right?
and it did. It did. He licensed it to a company called Time Records in Italy, and then it just blew up.
Mm. Yeah, and is it like a different level of, I mean, I would think different level of pressure when you're mixing a Madonna track or that kind of thing. What's that process like?
You know what it was? And after a while, I realized that they're calling me for a reason. And the reason is that they trust what I'm doing. And I love the fact that I was able to have and earn that trust, especially not only with the labels and promotion people, but some of the artists themselves had called me after the work was done. And then they told me how much they really enjoy the work, and that made me feel great to be able to not only continue in my own production, my own music, my own songs, but to actually approach each individual artist and song with integrity. That was very important.
Yeah, and it's nice to get the feedback, right? Especially for major artists who could work with anybody, but they're choosing you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's a big deal for sure. And like I love Delight, all Pet Shop Boys, all these bands it's all the groups that I really love.
And actually, the Delight remix that was done in my bedroom, believe it or not.
Oh, funny. Yeah, that's that's just some funky stuff too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the thing is too, part of your career is a lot of these are artists that are multi, have gone on for decades. Like they're artists that have just lasted forever, and the music goes on forever. Also, you've done a lot of soundtrack work, so talk about that a little bit, because I think were you involved in Sex and the City? And
yes,
right.
And that was purely coincidental and by accident again. I was a big fan of the show. I watched it every week, and then all of a sudden, Tommy Boy Records, which we were putting out a bunch of things. I was releasing records to them in New York, said, "Hey, there's a guy at Sex and the City who's interested in using one of the songs for, one of the episodes." And I'm just like, well, that's cool. I mean, sure. I mean, I love the show. And it aired, and I heard the song, and it just freaked me out. Because I was just watching the show and there was one of my tracks being
I know. It's so trippy when that stuff happens, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. So then then the music director, I forgot his name escapes me. The music director at the time actually called me and said, "What else have you got?"
Wow.
And I was like, "Where do you want me to begin? I've got a lot of stuff." And he goes, "Send me whatever you think that I could use, and then we'll work it from there." And then a couple of times he would come back at me and say, "Hey, I need this to sound a little like this or like that or like this." We're talking a minute 30 spots. It's not a lot of time spent.
Right, but very high profile.
Exactly. So I was very, very lucky and very blessed to have been part of the show. It was one of my favorites. It was on HBO. And then also Queer as Folk was Showtime. They used one or two tracks for their show. So I was very happy and very lucky to be involved in those things.
Yeah, and it's awesome. And those shows are much beloved, and it's nice. Yeah. A lot of people hear music on those shows and they think, "Oh, that's really cool," but they don't know the work behind it. They don't necessarily know the artist behind it. So it's nice to kind of shine a spotlight on that, because it takes a lot of work to get all that together, right?
I love the fact that Sex and the City's the musical director of the show was very cool about his ear about bar scenes and restaurant scenes and the music being played in the backgrounds. Those were all like considered to be a lot of chill house, a chill underground, and they were so ahead of their time when they were using that music for the show.
Yeah, and it's I mean that being a music director for a show like that
Yeah.
is such a or even we talk about like American Idol and those shows to be that is a 24-hour a day
Yes, that's exactly right.
for 15 years or however long. So God bless God bless those guys because I don't
Oh
know.
my God.
So let's jump
Absolutely.
to what's going on now because I know you have a lot of stuff always happening. What are some of the current things that you're working on that you can talk about?
The one thing, and I'm a big person of not letting the cat out of the bag, especially on the social media sensibility. I don't like the teasers, so to speak.
Right.
But right now, it actually started in 2020 during COVID. I decided that I wanted to do another album. And so I started working on it. And right now, it will be released next quarter. It's called La Collezione Privata, meaning the private collection. And then
Ah,
there's two parts to it. There's going to be the album versions of stuff, and then there's going to be extended mixes and remixes and rarities of those particular album tracks.
right.
So that one is called Estesa, which is meaning long version. So I wanted to do something cool that way. I'm still working on it now. I have 3 pieces that need to get done, but that's coming out first quarter. It's coming out of Stickman Records out of Canada. I wanted something a little different. I think a lot of stuff in America is overshadowed and overlooked as far as dance music and albums in that genre. It's just
Right. Yeah.
oversaturated. It's too much.
Yeah. I think a lot of people too, they kind of think when they think dance music, they're thinking of EDM, they're thinking of Ibiza, they're thinking of, but it's actually, I mean, there's a lot there and a lot of different, I know talking to Craig, our friend Craig, I
Hmm.
worked on a track with him and he remixed for us and he came out with 4 different versions. And I was like, I never really, and it was cool stuff. Each one stood on its own and
Right.
people don't realize like one song in the house or dance music can have many different iterations, right?
Yes. Yes. I mean, okay. So consider this 2020, started to work on this album. I thought I had it all finished up like 2 years later. And then I started changing things again
Mhm. Yeah,
because it just like all of a sudden I feel like I needed to be caught up with the times because I felt like it was like kind of sounding old or whatever. And,
right. Yeah.
that's what thing I love about having my own room and being in the studio is that you can just reinvent the wheel at any given time.
Yeah, and I mean, and do things do change, and especially in your world, like 6 months can be a long time.
Yes.
There's maybe a whole different vibe that comes out, and you want to capture some of that, right?
Absolutely. A little flavor of that goes a long way. It also scares me because, and this is another reason why I was kind of reluctant to do another album, is because there's so much an oversaturation of music. I
Hmm.
remember Leslie said there's at least 300,000 pieces of music that come out every Tuesday.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise out there,
Who has time to listen to 300,000 pieces of music?
right?
I don't.
Yeah, and that's part of that's we were talking about the podcast because I've been going now for 3 years where we just hit 400,000 downloads, and my one of my missions when I was originally thinking about this and actually releasing music in general as well is if
Right.
you don't have a plan to promote it, it's almost not it's almost no point to it.
It's
Only
non-existent.
because there's so much noise. You got to cut through the noise, right?
I was like that. I had a small label that was coming out, and all the channels were hit. Spotify and TrackSource and Beatport. They were everywhere.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you don't have the greasy wheel, if you don't squeak, it's never going to work. So that's the difference about this particular project and the album project is because there's going to be a whole PR team behind this thing when it comes down to Canada. And that's what I'm very excited about because I want to be able to reach other areas besides just here in America. I mean, you can release it on Tuesday and it's dead in water by Friday. I want
Yeah, and that's the thing too. You want longevity. You don't want to buzz for a couple of days, and it drops off the face
no,
of the earth, right?
you got to keep spoon feeding to keep interest.
Yeah, and I think it seems like today, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but it seems like we're now in a place with streaming, which is kind of one of the main outlets, is we're really in a singles driven world, right? The album, um, you have to kind of figure out how you're going to release, right? Are you going to release the full album? Or are you going to start releasing tracks? What's your approach with that?
Well, there was one single that was already released. towards the end of the summer, which is called So Amazing with my friend Andrea Love. And it was great. There was a little lyric video that was done. It was awesome to introduce part of what was happening or part of what was going to come. So, yeah, singles are great. I don't want to oversaturate anything with remixes because it loses the value of the original piece that it was meant
Right.
to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sure, there'll be a couple remixes here and there on things that I decide or whatever, but I want the album in its entirety to be an experience, and that's exactly what I'm trying to design it to be.
Yeah, and I prefer that. I mean, that we think when we think about music that we all grew up on, it was the
Right.
album. It was the whole story, not just part of the story. Right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
there's like the cool thing about it was like after I started tracking everything in 2020 all the way down to like 2022, 23, I started to think about being musical,
Right.
right? Being a little bit more musical, conscious of that. So there's all kinds of cool little interludes to introduce some of the songs on the album. It's like a minute or two of nothing but musicality. And my friend Jay Capo, who's an excellent drum and bass guy, and he's an excellent programmer and keyboardist. And I brought him in to do like he helped me out with Jennifer Lopez. He helped me out with a bunch of other remixes. And I love his energy. I love his soul that he carries. So we started doing these interludes in between some of the tracks for the album. So I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a cool, and it just kind of keeps everything cohesive, right?
Yeah,
It's like
keeps
a,
it
it's like a,
fresh.
it's kind of a bridge to the next piece.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. I like that. I like that idea a lot.
Yep.
Give me some advice that you give me some or my listeners some advice on things that you've learned along the way that you think young producers, young artists really need to focus on in this kind of crazy world that we live in musically.
Well, there's too much of the same thing over and over and over again. There's a lot of copy and paste. And I think that a lot of people are looking for instant fame. A lot of it is just add water and stir. And that seems to be what's going on. I think that if you have an individual sound and you're not copying something else, and you because there's a lot of people that do break the ground, and before you know it, there's copycats from those people, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I think that you got to believe in your craft. You totally have to believe in it. You have to make sure that you do have a strong PR outlet to promote and get that out there and get the word out about what you're doing. But at the same time, just believe in your work. You have to believe in your work, and try to be a little different because there's so much of the same thing that's out there. You know, it
Yeah, and
breeds
it's
the
good.
same
It's
thing.
good to have influences, but not copy them.
Oh,
Just
I
listen
mean,
and then make your own
it's
thing. Right.
inspiring. You can be inspiring, but it doesn't necessarily mean like I'm going to do it just like that. No,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
make it
Exactly.
your own. That's what they've always done through years. A lot of people have made it their own, so that's important. Make it
Yeah,
your
and
own.
it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. I said make it your own. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that that's important. Like, I mean, we all grew up with our influences, but I always say like, there's already a Jocko and there's already a Marcus Miller. These guys, it's like, but you appreciate what they do, and then guys take that and they kind of run with it and come up with a new version, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. There was one time where when I was doing remixes, there was one guy, which will remain nameless. And he was actually just doing bootleg remixes, right? Or sometimes he had gotten hired to do remixes and flat out, as bold as it was, he stole most of the drum work that I basically had as intros or outros and just started putting his own stuff on top of it.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, I was flattered, but I'm just like, dude, can you be original for 1 second?
Yeah, or at least credit me, right?
Well, I don't care about the credit, but my God, let's be original for a second here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that kind of gets into the whole sampling thing, which is a bit tricky. That's
Yes.
kind of a bit of a tricky road because there's a lot of stuff has been done really cool with that with
Right.
sampling, but it becomes into you get into whole rights issues and like you said, what's copying versus coming up with your own version. It's very tricky, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I love when they take a lot of nostalgic tracks, especially disco or funk tracks, and reinvent the wheel with them. That's total. That's really geekdom and talent at its best.
Absolutely. Who are some young artists that you have kind of keyed in on as maybe up and comers that you might suggest people check out?
As far as DJs, I say Karsten Solars is really good. He's a local guy in Chicago, and I really like. He's different. he's putting out his own thing, his own sound, and he's standing out, which I love when they do that. You stand out because you're doing something a little different. He's the only one that rings true, that stands out, that I actually love. And I've heard his stuff. Mark Knight is another guy, but he's out of across the pond, out of the UK, and he inspires me as well. But he's also very consistent in what he's doing. It's always on point whenever he releases a mix or something, or he puts out his own tracks. It's always on point.
Yeah, and something that also too along those lines is something you've mentioned a couple of times is being consistent and keep putting out music, right? Has that like been a real big theme for you to be successful?
I was doing it for a while, and then I actually scaled back a little bit because the oversaturation of music started depressing me a little bit, because I started thinking to myself, why am I putting this stuff out? Again, like we mentioned, it comes out on Tuesday and it's dead by Friday. I'm
Right.
like, why am I killing yourself? Most of the DJs and most people like myself use it as a marketing tool, for their gigs, and say, hey, I'm playing here in San Francisco, and by the way, here's my new track.
Right. Yeah. And it generates press and yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, all of a sudden we as DJs have become not only recording engineers and programmers and remixers, and we're also becoming PR people at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of the modern artist thing. I mean, that's kind of
It
what you
is.
are.
It
Because
is.
I tell people that too. Like, well, how do you be successful doing this and doing that? I'm like, you know what? You work hard. You got to figure it out. You got to find new pathways. You're going to
Right.
be your own marketing person, your own PR.
You got exactly. You do. And not to mention that, especially if you have a history, that's there, and that's your foundation. I mean, that's a very important thing, especially if you're consistent in today's market and you're doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and if you're going to be professional, you have to treat it like a job in a way, because the business part has got to be taken care of. Otherwise, you're not going to
No,
be
it
able to do
is.
the other
That's
part.
why, you know what? I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, and PRing is not one of them.
Well,
So I can prove.
I think you're
uh,
actually really good at it in the sense that you have a great history and you're well spoken. You know
well,
what you know. Yeah.
I know what I know, but the thing is, also throughout the years, there's another part of me that I wanted to say as well. After all these years, a lot of it has been mutual respect for a lot of other artists and a lot of remixers and a lot of record people at the time and a lot of promoters. It's constant mutual respect. I always go back to my family in that respect, in that area. I like being familiar and working hard with the same people that understand what that is, the value of working hard.
Yeah, and that can't be discounted. No matter how talented you are, you gotta get up every day and make it happen.
Absolutely.
Hey, Ralphie, how,
Absolutely.
how can people find you online? And I know you got social media pages and all that stuff.
Just Ralphi Rosario, the official fan page on Facebook, and there's also Ralphie underscore Rosario on Instagram. Those are the two main channels right now. I don't visit them as often as I would want to, well, because I've been too busy trying to finish off the album, and I want it. Once that's done, then I'm gonna scream it to the highest tops of every mountain and talk about it then.
Yeah, I think me and you are both are one of the last few holdouts on AOL email.
No, my friend Abel, who was also the other part of Roosevelt, we had
I
gotten
was going to mention
nominated.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
we
Yeah.
also got nominated for that Rihanna mix on Only Girl in the World. He still has his AOL email.
We'll see. So all the cool guys still have it.
I think so. It's funny because you got all these Google people going, AOL, is this still there? I'm just like, yeah, just like MySpace is still there. What's the problem?
I know, right? And you know what's funny about? I mean, people bag on MySpace, but I'll tell you what, because I grew up in LA doing the clubs, the whiskey, the Roxy, all that stuff,
Right.
self promoting. As soon as I saw MySpace, I instantly got what that was. I'm like, that's a website, but it's more than that because you don't have to fight to get people to your website.
Right.
And then Facebook and all these other apps have kind of burgeoned off of that, that premise. But
Yeah, but you remember how important that whole thing was, that there was a whole roster of artists and you can click on any and all of them. It was not videos of monkeys falling off trees. It wasn't a cat falling from a balcony. It
yeah,
was, I
exactly.
find those to be like, again, distractions. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is distractions.
Yeah. You gotta stay focused. It's cool to chill, but you gotta stay focused. It has, what I would say is it has opened up a lot of people to different artists that maybe they had never heard before.
Absolutely.
That used to, MTV way back in the day used to kind of fulfill that a little bit, but that's kind of gone, unfortunately.
Oh, I know. And that's sad because it's like there's so many fantastic videos out there. There's so many innovative things that are out there as far as videos on YouTube and everything. I'm like, why can't we have MTV back to play these things?
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk to our buddy Dean about that.
I mean, it's like it's missing. I love that, Friday night videos and Saturday, thing where there was just music videos being played. It was an outlet that everyone totally forgot about.
Yeah.
And I hate that happens.
Yeah, I was in high school when MTV started hitting, and that was like, wow, what the hell is this? This is so cool.
I was addicted. Romeo Void,
all the
Madonna videos that were there, Men at Work. I mean, it was great. A Culture Club. It was awesome to see all these things.
Yeah, we're old.
Right?
But
Culture
you know
Club,
what?
Who's that?
Yeah, but you know what? That stuff still holds up. And a lot of those acts, they're still out touring. So God bless them.
They are still, and that's one of the greatest things about owning a catalog. It still generates revenue for you, no matter how old.
Right. It is. Yeah, exactly. And those songs they're not going to be going away. It's actually funny to me that Guns N' Roses now is considered classic rock. I find that hilarious.
It is hilarious. I mean, I think of the Doobie Brothers as classic rock.
Yeah, exactly. Or Chicago.
But I love them too.
Yeah, I love all those bands. Hey, Ralphie, thanks for taking the time. I know you're super busy, and I'm actually going to go photograph Monday Night Football tonight, so you'll see me on ESPN.
Cool. Awesome. Send me some shots. I want to see what's going on over there in a different playing field, a different area besides the audience.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I love the audience on those games. Are hilarious and they're fun to watch too. It's just as enjoyable as the football.
Absolutely.
But, hey, hopefully we have got some stuff possibly in the works with our friend Dean, and we'll see what happens with that. But
I'm excited about that. It's a different page.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of your story deserves to be told. It has been told somewhat, but there's a lot more to tell. So.
Yeah, there's a whole area of that. That's what I'm discussing with Dean. There's a whole area of just the whole history and how Hot Mix 5 began. And that's a really big thing that I'm trying to focus on right now. And Dean has been very instrumental in holding my hand and making me understand how I can help put this together.
Yeah, and for people listening, so Dean Bushala, he's a producer, and he a producer, video director, reality TV guy, has 3 shows on Disney Plus right now. Has worked on Moonshiners, Deadliest Catch, Ice Road Truckers, all these different shows. So hopefully something good will be happening here soon with that.
Yes, I'm very, very lucky to have him around.
That's a little inside information that we're dropping.
Yeah, right.
But hey, Ralphie, have a great day in Chicago, and give my friend Craig a hug, and hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. I hope to see him soon. We've got to get together and do some work all over again. So
awesome. Yeah, hopefully we'll get a chance to hang out.
I really appreciate you.
Yeah, we've never met in person, so we got to make that happen.
Absolutely. We will. All
right, man. Have a good day.
All right. Ciao.
Awesome. Thanks, Ralphie.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us, and please consider subscribing to our podcast and follow us on our social media pages for guest announcements.